Hi, my name is Skye Stewart, and I'm going to be taking you through the prison epistles, Ephesians, Colossians, Philippians, and Philemon. So, where do we start in all of this? Well, these are 4 books of the Bible. They're found in the New Testament, and these are epistles, which is really just a fancy word for a very elegant and formal letter. And this was written by Paul, who was an apostle of Jesus, was formerly a Pharisee who was against Jesus, his followers, and all that he stood for as the Messiah. And after an encounter with Jesus, changed everything, became an apostle, became a missionary, went and spread the good news about Jesus, founded many churches across Rome and Europe, and he was imprisoned for that. And so while he was in 2 different imprisonments, he wrote these 4 letters that were delivered to various audiences by different individuals. So why don't we get into all that this is? It's important to note too that Colossians, Ephesians, and Philemon were not written during the same imprisonment as the book of Philippians. These were sent out at different times. The 3 were written in Caesarea, while Philippians was written in Rome, a couple of years apart. And so let's get started into the book of Ephesians. So this letter was written to the church in Ephesus, and the main idea here was really that unity is possible when we're connected to Jesus and each other through the local church. And in this letter, he has it split up. The first half really focuses on the gospel and really what God has done for us through his son Jesus, bringing that unity, forgiveness, and adoption into sonship with Christ. And so then he connects the 2 parts of his letter with that word, therefore. Therefore, all of that, the forgiveness, the unity, the adoption, changes how it affects our life story, our story in connection with other people, and how we should live through that. So that's Ephesians. Now moving on to the book of Colossians. This was a letter written to the church in Colossae. The main point here was that Paul really wanted to give a proper view of Christ in aiding the believers of Colossae against the false teachings and societal pressures that they were finding there in their city, in that environment. And so this is sort of split up into a couple of different sections as well. In the beginning, through a poem, he writes out and exalts Jesus as the true image of God. As false teachings and different false gods and idols were being presented to these believers, Paul really wanted to make that point very clear. And then he focused in on how his suffering as an apostle was actually exalting Jesus as it was living out really what Christ had experienced in suffering. So he was happy to do it. And then he really focused in then on the pressure that they were facing to turn away from Jesus and wanted to address them, give them some validity, but also encourage them against that, and how there was actually a new way of life presented that Jesus' resurrection opened up for them. And that's what he focuses on the end of that letter, really just giving that proper view of who Jesus was so that they had a better way to fight against all of the pressures that they were facing. And now the book of Philippians, this was an epistle written to the church in Philippi. The main point here was that Paul really wanted them to know that knowing Jesus is a deeply personal and transformative thing, and he invites others to follow in on that. And this is all centered around what's commonly referred to as the Messiah poem. And so of course, it's split up. He talks more about how that suffering was participating in the story of Jesus through his opening prayer and talking more about his imprisonment. But then he encourages them again to follow Jesus and his example, his convictions of who he is, and how that offers an example for all of these people to take part in. And he gives a couple of actual examples of people that they know, Timothy, Epaphroditus, and then himself. And at the end, it's just that final challenge of living that out, kind of really focusing in on how their past is something that can be left behind and it doesn't define us to who we have been made in Christ. So this is really just a powerful book. It's commonly referred to as well as like the book of joy, like a joy book, because Paul just so expresses how a life that is personal and transformative in knowing Jesus brings such joy. The last book that we're going to talk about is Philemon, which is the shortest of Paul's letters. It's written to a friend of his named Philemon in Colossae. And so the mission behind this letter was really to get Philemon to forgive Onesimus, who was a slave of his, and to accept him as a brother. Onesimus had wronged Philemon. He fled Philemon as his slave, but then he finds Christ after meeting Paul. And so Paul really shows him that Onesimus has become not just a slave, but he's become a brother in Christ. And so as they are partners in Christ, Paul and Philemon, he encourages Philemon to see Onesimus as well as that brother in Christ, and really just encourages him to go above and beyond, to see that he has been changed, transformed, to give him another chance, and to bring him up as a brother, a fellow brother in Christ. So those are the prison epistles. Thank you so much.